The Burying the Hatchet Ceremony happened in Nova Scotia on June 25, 1761 and successfully ended a period of protracted warfare, which had lasted over 75 years and encompassed 6 wars, between the MIKMAQ people and the British. The Burying the Hatchet Ceremony was the culmination of a negotiated treaty that created an enduring peace and a commitment to obey the rule of law. Despite the intentions of the British dignitaries who attended the ceremony and helped draft the treaty, many of the treaty commitments were ignored by local settlers who migrated onto MIKMAQ and Maliseet territories. 15 years after the ceremony, some warfare returned as Maliseet and Micmac communities joined Americans against the British in the American Revolution. Since the treaties were enshrined into the Canadian Constitution in 1982, there have been numerous judicial decisions that have upheld these treaties in the Canadian Supreme Court, the most recognized being the Donald Marshall case. Nova Scotians celebrate the treaties of 1760–61 every year on Treaty Day. Historical context: the northeastern region of North America, encompassing New England and Acadia, MIKMAKI, increasingly became an area of conflict between the expanding French and British empires. Expansion by both empires, over a 75-year period, through 6 wars, brought the MIKMAQ and Acadians into conflict with British New Englanders. Frontier warfare against families was the Wabanaki Confederacy and New England approach to warfare since King William's War began in 1688. Over this 75 years, there was a long history of the Wabanaki Confederacy killing British civilians along the New England-Acadia border in Maine. In an effort to prevent these French and Wabanaki massacres of British subjects, many Massachusetts governors issued a bounty for the scalps of men, women, and children of the Wabanaki Confederacy. During Father Loutre's War, Edward Cornwallis followed New England's example when, after the raid on Dartmouth, he attempted to protect the first British settlers in Nova Scotia from being scalped by putting a bounty on the MIKMAQ. During the final period of this conflict, the French and Indian War, French officers, MIKMAQ and Acadians carried out military strikes against the British, particularly after the deportation of the Acadians and the Bounty Proclamation of 1756. The MIKMAQ and their French allies conducted the Northeastern Coast Campaign in Maine and extended this campaign into Nova Scotia, attacking civilians during the raids on Lunenburg. Following the British capture of Louisbourg in 1758, Quebec in 1759, and Montreal in 1760, French imperial power was destroyed in North America. With the loss of their French ally, the MIKMAQ recognized the need for a new relationship with the British. There were various treaties signed with other tribes of the MIKMAQ and Maliseet before the formal Burying the Hatchet Ceremony. On the 11th of February 1760, 2 tribes of the Passamaquoddy and St. John River came to Halifax with Colonel Arbuthnot and appeared before council, renewing the Treaty of 1725, giving hostages all their good behavior. Truck houses for trade were established at Fort Frederick. 2 days later, on February 13, a treaty was ratified with Roger Morris and one of the MIKMAQ chiefs. The following month, the 10th of March 1760, 3 MIKMAQ chiefs Paul Larratt, Michael Austin, Kalud Rennie made a treaty. The treaties continued even after the formal ceremony. On 15 October 1761, Jans Vapitogashoise made a treaty. Former ally of Father Loutre, French priest Pierre Maillard accepted an invitation from Nova Scotia Governor Charles Lawrence to travel to Halifax and assist in negotiating with the MIKMAQ peoples. he became a British official. He asked for permission to maintain an oratory at a Halifax battery, where he held Catholic services for Acadians and MIKMAQs in the area. In his official capacity, Maillard was able to obtain agreement from most of the tribal chiefs to sign peace treaties with the British in Halifax. The ceremony. On June 25, 1761, a «burying of the hatchet ceremony» was held at Governor Jonathan Belcher's garden on present-day Spring Garden, Halifax, in front of the courthouse. Representing the colony were Belcher and 4 members of the Nova Scotia Council: Richard Bulkley, John Collier, Joseph Gerrish, and Alexander Grant. Also present were Admiral Lord Colville, Commander-in-Chief of British Naval Forces in North America, Major General John Henry Bastide, the Chief Engineer in Nova Scotia, and Colonel William Forster, the commander of Nova Scotia's army regiments. These 3 men were accompanied by a detachment of soldiers. There were at least 4 MIKMAQ chiefs that signed the treaty: Genote Peg Idlewant, Claude Atuish, Joseph Sabicharlawi, and Icon Ashabuck. Representatives from other villages were also present at the treaty signing. The occasion was one of great pomp and ceremony. The 2 parties faced each other near a British flag. French priest Pierre Maillard was in the middle, acting as the interpreter. Belcher promised the Crown would protect the MIKMAQ from unscrupulous traders, protect their religion, and not interfere with Catholic missionaries living among them. Belcher gave presents to each chief along with medals that were passed down through generations as testimony to the words that bound their people to uphold the peace. Both Belcher and the chiefs then moved to the flag post, where Belcher and the chiefs formally buried the hatchet. One of the MIKMAQ chiefs declared that he now buried the hatchet on behalf of himself and his whole tribe, a token of their submission and of their having made peace. The chief of the Cape Breton Mi'kmaq declared, "As long as the sun and the moon shall endure, as long as the earth on which I dwell shall exist in the same state as you this day, with the laws of your government, faithful and obedient to the Crown." At the same time the hatchet was being buried, the chiefs went through the ceremony of washing the paint from their bodies in token of hostilities being ended. The whole ceremony was concluded by all present drinking to the King's health. The cornerstone of the Halifax Provincial Court now stands beside the spot of the burial, a symbol of peace and the rule of law. Aftermath. The British were relieved that a peace was reached. The vicar at St. Paul's Church, Thomas Wood, praised Father Maillard for his efforts in negotiating it when he wrote, "Thanks to Maillard, many Englishmen were saved from being massacred." The MIKMAQ retained a strong sense of themselves as a separate people. They still had their own language, a distinct material culture, trial institutions, and a spiritual life informed by MIKMAQ tradition and an ongoing attachment to the Catholic Church. Despite British attempts to convert them to Protestantism in the 1750s, the disrespect they often received from British colonists only served to emphasize their status as a separate nation. According to historian John G. Reid, the treaties of 1760–61, while they contained statement of MIKMAW submission to the British Crown, what is known of the surrounding discussions, combined with the strong evidence of later MIKMAW statements, indicates that a friendly and reciprocal relationship was the real intent. The MIKMAW leaders who came initially to Halifax in 1760 had clear goals that centered on the making of peace, the establishment of a secure and well-regulated trade in commodities such as furs, and an ongoing friendship with the British Crown. In return, they offered their own friendship and a tolerance of limited British settlement, although without any formal land surrender. To fulfill the friendly and reciprocal intent of the treaties, further British settlement of land would need to be negotiated, and, in exchange for sharing the land, presents would be given to the MIKMAQ. The documents summarizing the peace agreements failed to establish specific territorial limits on the expansion of British settlements. but they assured the MIKMAQ access to the natural resources that had long sustained them along the region's coasts and in the woods. As the New England planters and United Empire Loyalists began to arrive in the MIKMAQ in greater numbers, economic, environmental and cultural pressures were put in the MIKMAQ with the erosion of the intent of the treaties. The MIKMAQ tried to enforce the treaties through threat of force. At the beginning of the American Revolution, many MIKMAQ and Maliseet tribes were supportive of the Americans against the British. They participated in the Margoville Rebellion and the Battle of Fort Cumberland in 1776. During the St. John River Expedition, Carl Allen's untiring effort to gain the friendship and support of the Maliseet and MIKMAQ for the revolution was somewhat successful. There was a significant exodus of Maliseet from the St. John River to join the American forces at Machias, Maine. On Sunday, July 13, 1777, a party of between 400 and 500 men, women, and children embarked in 128 canoes from the old Fort Majuetic for Machias. The party arrived at a very opportune moment for the Americans, and afforded material assistance in the defense of that post during the attack made by Sir George Collier on the 13th to the 15th of August. The British did only minimal damage to the place, and the services of the Indians on the occasion earned for them the thanks of the Council of Massachusetts. In June 1779, MIKMAQ in the Miramichi attacked and plundered some of the British in the area. The following month, British Captain John Augustus Harvey, in command of HMS Viper, arrived in the area and battled with the MIKMAQ. One MIKMAQ was killed and 16 were taken prisoner to Quebec. The prisoners were eventually brought to Halifax, where they were later released upon signing the Oath of Allegiance to the British Crown on 28 July 1779. As their military power waned in the beginning of the 19th century, the MIKMAQ people made explicit appeals to the British of the reciprocal intent of the treaties and the duty of the British to give presents to the MIKMAQ for occupying MIKMAKI. In response, the British offered charity, or, the word most often used by government officials, relief, and relief always came with strings attached. The MIKMAQ must give up their way of life and begin to settle on farms. Their children were to be sent for a proper education to British schools.